It's a pleasure to see you and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We thank Jeremy, Amy, and Daniel for all their work to set up this fine room and set up these meetings. We welcome you all. I'm Bruce Johnson. I'm from the Higher Education Coordinating Commission and serving on this board along with each of the board members. And it looks like we've got a full house. This might be the first time ever. This is grand. And thank you for all those that are joining us with the teams. And so, Daniel, would you give us a roll call?
Yes, Justin Hurley Brasmo,
I am here.
Bruce Johnson,
Here.
Dave Lintz,
Here.
William Messner,
Present.
Maddie Sutter,
Here.
Cynthia Wagner,
Here.
Kent Yu.
Here.
That is a full roster and we have quorum. So, next up for business.
Next up for business, and I want to take just a moment to kind of express something that Kent and I talked about after the last meeting is our goal is to be here in person, especially for all the big meetings. If we know we're going to be looking at a proposal for the coming year, we're expecting you to be here in person. If PGE pulls Bill out because we just had power go down, we get that. Or if the hospital calls Cynthia and says, half the unit is down, we're going to understand that. And so we've got your back, but we want to encourage as much participation in person while possible. If you have a mitigating situation where your employer just and say maybe they pull you out to another state or to another professional meeting, we understand that. But our goal will be to be here as much as possible.
Well, I don't know if that came from me calling in while I was on vacation, but I will not be changing that behavior.
You and I have no excuse.
Yes, that's right.
So I think it's a good suggestion. It's helpful. I think we can be more productive. And it's also very helpful to have the good data. One of our goals will be to put better information together as we advance information up to DAS that we've summarized that shows either the lead status, the seismic status, the deferred maintenance reduced, those kind of metrics that we either have or can easily get. So we'll be ramping up our services in that way to have a quality product. This was something Jeremy asked for that I think will help us kind of size up, as we look at all the proposals going forward. I just wanted to have those kind of introductory comments. And now we'll move forward with new business. And Daniel is leading us through statewide facility planning. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, so get my bearings here. I'm gonna do a share. So just to give you a little bit of a background, generally in January of these even number years, our media is sort of consumed with having sort of a casual, almost retreat style conversation about the road ahead. And that's kind of how I thought about this meeting. But to do that with the meat of the updated manual, which if you recall from, I think, our last meeting, we went through it briefly and I showed a CPAB report. I kind of gave you a bit of an outline of what is in the manual, just to give you your own sense of orientation. But I've made a few different changes, but we want to use this for an open conversation and sort of review to ensure that does this make sense? Because we have a lot of new people, and is your charge and sort of the procedure that you're charged with clear? That's kind of the goal here. So there's no wrong question, or there's no issue in terms of us discussing something at length, just trying to get clarity on them. So just to give you some idea about a couple of the changes since I sent this to you, I sent it to you twice now. But the first version was just kind of an introductory draft. This one is closer to being finalized. There's a couple of things I want to draw your attention to. One is the language added around building industry performance standards. So just ensuring that that is referenced in the manual and that it is present in the minds of those responding for CPAB. And also outlining the executive order for which we discussed last meeting, which we are planning to release a template, data collection template in this sort of first sort of CPAB year to help populate our TRIRIGA to allow agencies to kind of assess the size of the bread box and sort of prioritize their interventions to try to address some of this life safety concerns over time. So it's just ensuring that this is in here is something that is now a part of the process. I think most importantly, worth discussing as I'm skimming along here is how, so approximately from, let's see, it'll begin in earnest in March, but really from April, May, June, July, and August are these structured meetings to which agencies are, well, it's not really April because we're pushing it to May, I think is, yeah, that's the CP. So the CPAB meetings in earnest begin in May, and they have began in April before in the past, but the reason why it's a little bit further late in the session or the calendars because like last year, the governor's office asked us to postpone the process and move it back so they can meet with agencies first to kind of review projects. So you weren't reviewing projects that weren't supported by the governor's office, like at face value or for whatever reason. So that makes sense, but what it did is it compressed our review timeline to about 3 months. And so if you have 20 agencies in 3 months, you can imagine that that's a lot. And so we had to actually adjust the meeting schedule to be like 4 hours. And I can't guarantee that won't be the case in this situation but the proposal, what this represents right here on these groups is the proposal I've made where I'm assigning agencies to groups, and the logic behind it is agencies that are less complex, they're smaller portfolio, they maybe have 1 building or maybe 5 buildings, something. They would go first, and the agencies that have the most sort of complexity and sort of the size of their portfolio would go last. But the equity in that is that, you're a smaller agency, but you have less to kind of deal with. And so the agencies that have more complex portfolios need more time. Yes, Bill.
So you said that those meetings will be 4 hours.
I'm saying we have employed that as a tactic in the past.
Which is fine. I just want to look at my calendar right now. The calendar hasn't been expanded for that. So
Yeah.
I invites around. So if we're going to do that, it's like let's get the right time on our calendars because we're going to have conflicts otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's a valid comment that we should.
And I think that's consistent with all the dates that need to be expanded.
Yeah.
And then I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dan. I know you're going through it. And I think there is one typo
Oh, good.
in on page 12. CPAB meeting of July 9th. I think it's actually is July 10th. The 9th is the Thursday and the 10th is a Friday.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So,
You can find Mesmer.
You're welcome.
So the table one sort of shows where my thinking is as far as the assignment of these agencies, that I'm trying to push for an extra month. So we would start in May, but the agencies that would present in May are agencies that generally have either no capital requests or simply have a very small portfolio where they're just dealing with capital improvements. And so that's kind of my proposal, that I'm sort of working with the chief financial office to kind of get to whether or not that's going to be satisfactory to everyone and their approach on the budgeting side of things.
So do those groups represent a single meeting? So we'd review 5 agencies in one meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
And so basically we just carve up the meeting, apportion it equally, and with a little bit of transition time. But there's a lot to cover, and we keep every biennium we kind of add a little sort of piece of content to the presentation, so it just kind of makes the narrative part of it a little bit longer and longer. So that's where you get into these circumstances where we need to just expand the length of the meeting. So I think what we'll do is just we'll expand it to like 4 hours, but that's just like a buffer, you know. But the meetings that we did have, we started at 9 o'clock, and it's really just I really hate. I wouldn't say I hate that word, but it was. I regretted that because people having to commute here and be paying attention for like 5 agencies to go through, you know, it's a lot. So I'm mindful of the impact of that, of people who volunteer their time, and you know, so within those groups, you could see the schedule that is ignoring the 9th. Is my best job is sort of breaking this down. So one of the procedural things that there isn't a great deal of interaction between CPAB and CPC, because CPC has sort of purview over the capital and sort of project reviews for, you know, facilities in area plans. But we sort of made the determination like a couple bienniums ago that if there's a project that is in Salem, that we need to confirm that it actually complies with the area plan before it gets submitted as a capital project. I mean, that just makes sense. But to do that, you know, you got to go to CPC first. So there's this sort of procedural cadence and coordination, which is what this schedule, I think, tries to make sense of, that if you're going to have a project that's in the city of Salem, and it's a capital project over $1 million, you have another layer of review and another bunch of dates you got to be mindful of. So that's what that sort of gets at. Those are the big changes that from the previous document. So like I said, I just want to kind of answer any questions and sort of confirm what everybody sort of understands about what the job is here, and sort of zero in, and maybe instead of me just like, you know, stating and running through this, we just kind of start there and say like, you know, and it's fine. It's like, you know, Daniel, I have no idea what I'm doing, versus can you explain why you did this? So that's fair. I guess I have kind of an overarching, I think, strategy here. This outlines what we kind of expect from agencies, And then there's a conversation about what is effectively achievable within this sort of framework, because we have some unfortunate data issues that may not be fully clear to the board why that is. And how do we strengthen the review process in the absence of, up-to-date data? What do we rely on to, satisfy that an agency is fulfilling its plan obligations, and as well as its sort of your project review sort of criteria is being addressed, just within the lack of data. So part of it is to put more emphasis on a presentation, and so there's more of a qualitative component to it. And so part of this is sort of structured around, yes, we have this very simple to produce CPAB report that we demonstrated, but it is the accuracy of that depends on how the data is managed within TRIREGA, and that depends on there being data in TRIREGA to manage. And for some agencies, because we have had difficulty getting facility conditions assessments funded, not true of all agencies, but there are some data holes. And so we have to contend with some data holes in terms of the accuracy of the numbers that we're dealing with when reviewing agencies. So how do we sort of strengthen the review process to ensure that? So like I said, I think it's a focus on the qualitative aspects of it, and it just makes sense. And ultimately, how does your review and your sort of support or recommendation for what the plan is and the projects are translates to a deliverable that we would provide? And I think I may have mentioned this in the past, that we've done varying things about what is the output of the CPAB process, and what is the board's role in sort of informing that output? Is it a series of projects that are recommended, which maybe you're a project you are championing, versus a project that you support, which means you're not vetoing the project, and there's maybe a project that you don't support, but there's context to it, and it's like, how do we impart the context in kind of a deliverable in a way that elevates the conversation and ensures that your expertise is being sort of honored in the review process, and so it's meaningful, and whatnot. So so that's kind of where I'm at. The other thing is that I want to touch on at some point is, in the past bienniums, we have used sort of a checklist or something that would guide you to in the review process to affirm that this is something that you support versus don't support. We've done various versions of that, and like I have an old example. Like this is something from, I think, oh, you can't see that. This is where I mess up. I never have enough room on my screen to. So these are generally like questions that we, in the planning manual, use to have the agencies address to kind of, qualify their product or their plan to, what does it convey in terms of its impact and its sort of purpose. And so we've done this where there's a way to kind of audit this. Does the agency, was it clear that they showed how the plan implements their mission, purpose, and goals? And, what are significant factors? Did they cover that? Ultimately, what you're trying to get to, and why I'm kind of going around is what is the criteria that you want to establish that says we are accepting this plan? That's the thing. So is it we're accepting this plan because you've submitted all the materials as we've requested, and maybe some of it we don't like or not, but because you've submitted them and you've complied, we accept your plan? Or is there some other aspect of it? And what would that be? And how is that, what is sort of the practicality of it? So I just wanted to float that out there because, like I said, in terms of equipping the board to be able to do what it is we're asking them to do, it's like, what do you need to do that and support that? And how does it translate into this, this kind of output that we're looking for to kind of guide, the process or the projects forward, I guess, or help elevate the conversation, I guess. Maybe that's.
Daniel, I had a few thoughts on that, if I may.
You are more than welcome.
I think it's tremendously helpful both to have the review checklist, that would be one. And then on page 18, there's an excellent set of questions that show like some criteria that show like does the project adequately address the stated purpose or need? And is it supported by the agency's strategic facility and master plan? I think anchoring in on the strategy, both from the agency perspective, but also the greater state perspective is just important. We see that over in education, higher education. There's always a link to a state goal. And so I think if we link to a state goal, that'll be one of the most important things we can assess as our team. Have we achieved or will we move the dial by this project? And then I think we have to ask that scope of how much deferred maintenance are we going to eliminate? It's a really important question because sometimes we don't need new space. We just need to bring our space up to code. And sometimes it might be seismic. It might be a lead consideration, or it might be other energy. We've had some new guidance on certifying the space that we've made it the most efficient. So those metrics that we can draw in should be part of our analysis. And my sense is it's best to advance all the projects. But if we do find some that have some bottlenecks, some gaps, some elements that need further analysis, we probably will ask some additional questions of each agency.
Yeah. And we've done that. We've actually asked agencies to come back with further information. It's a little bit challenging when to do that before agency budgets are due, which is in September, but we usually use August for that. But we'll have to make do in some way if that's important for the board.
Well, and the other, can I add some more thought on that? I think on page 14, one of the forms that, or there's a whole group of valuable forms that the agencies provide. One is like the 107 BF. I think it's 2 that talks about the planning. And then part of this is to give DAS an idea of what the financing might be for the project.
Yeah.
And so these forms are useful and that they'll be a complement to the other information. So as we build our own packets, each member will have those questions and we'll do an assessment for each project or each agency proposal, each major proposal.
So the budget forms are useful, even though they seem The budget forms are what would be submitted with the agency request budget. And there, but for some of these agencies, they'd be drafting them earlier than that agency budget would be submitted. They're one and the same with those forms. And so there's some logic in to say, well, why don't you just submit those as part of the agency? They will submit that. The reason they would work on them as part of their agency facility plan development is because there's actually calculations and metrics in there that are useful for filling out the requirements for the plan presentation, you know, your FCI, your this, your that. So, so it's not like those budget forms are totally sort of imperative for your review of the overall plan. They're mostly for the budgeting process.
Probably, could I add that probably the most important one for us will be the 107 BF11, the major construction.
Yes.
Just because there's a nice summary in there, there's kind of a split of what they think the project cost will be and how much will be contributed in what ways, what kind of.
And their sort of contingencies and
Yeah,
other.
and that's useful for, you know, that whole team of invisible people that are helping us, all the people at DAS, everyone that's looking at the state total capacity for debt.
Yeah.
And I might ask supplemental question there. Is there a consistent budgeting technique that all agencies use, or they use a different one? So they're all measuring against different tools.
What do you mean by budgeting technique?
Well, Bruce just said that in major construction acquisition project, there's a summary and there's a budget. So
Project budget, yeah.
are they using us?
Yeah, they all use
Every
that.
agency using.
Every agency uses one of those forms if it's a major construction.
But there isn't some template thing where it's like you're building up a project pro forma per se that's very specific down to, you know, square footages or something like that. It's a little
not
more-
consistent.
it's a little bit more aggregate than that. But the form is consistent.
Sure,
Every agency uses the form.
sure.
Related question.
Yeah.
I know you can't boil the ocean and there's gonna be a lot of imperfection baked into this process, but having seen organizations with different amounts of resources, those resources in turn determine how successful they often are at being able to provide good data. And so I know there's inherent risk baked into this. It's lovely as it is. But do you feel like most of the agencies have the qualified capacity to be able to consistently or direction and capacity to be able to consistently just calculate some of the inputs, or how much variability is that either in coming up with a capital project budget or assessing condition? One that we had a big debate on internally in my team was assessing current replacement value. There's just lots of different methods to do that. So there's going to be variability in resources and skill and all of that, but to what degree do the agencies vary? I'm just curious, like how
That's exactly what I'm
much
asking.
lack of certainty is built into the
If
process?
if 5 agencies need new carpet, are we using the same number for
Is it
carpet?
the secretary, yeah,
Simple
is it
as
the
that.
administrative specialist who's doing that calculation, or is it an architect? And that could vary, and that's fine. I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, what you're describing is the purpose and need for our FCA project, which is that there's a standard, consistent methodology through which things are assessed, and that's what we're trying to get to. We sort of had that before, but that data aged out, and the system went away and got transitioned to something else. So now we're in a different system with a little bit different kind of structure and approach, and our FCA approach will match that, and then the data will be consistent. In terms of generating a whole project, I think, I don't know, Jeremy, what are your thoughts about how the inconsistency versus consistency of the agencies? I mean, there's certainly agencies that utilize DAS for project management and cost estimating, so there's consistency there, but I think they also have the volition to get independent, whatever. So we don't have anything unless we have our maybe you can talk about that.
I'm thinking it's a fund growth, right? So we have many agencies that come up with their own studies and cost estimates, and they bring them forward without a lot of oversight. That's why the more we can put into what you have to present as an agency, as a CPAB request to receive the limitation for the project, that's the way we're going to be able to start hardening how we're coming up with those cost estimates. Because right now, many agencies essentially are doing it on a napkin, is my feeling. I don't know if that's appropriate to say, but like with DAS, we're using feasibility studies. We're bringing in engineers and architects to develop our estimates. And that's what we want to use this group for, is to create basically a matrix, a decision matrix of how you develop cost estimates for projects. And I think that that's something that we can achieve over the next couple of years for this upcoming CPAP. We just simply haven't had the time to integrate all of these different data.
Along those lines, I think that's great. I'm just wondering, is there any process built in where an agency could have a checkbox that is non-punitive, is non-binding, but it just says, I had no resources to try to pull this together, or I had a whole slew of resources, kind of a confidence value in the inputs that they give, not in a punitive way, but just to understand what level of confidence they had in their process. And maybe even just a comment box where they could say, I didn't really have the resources to fill this out. I didn't know how to do it, but here's what's happening. And I just asked because, sometimes I think driving in data-driven directions is incredibly important. And where you start often determines where you end. And so it would be unfortunate if somebody had an incredibly critical project, but they were significantly under-resourced, that they wouldn't be able to compete as well in the race because they didn't have the resources to train to begin with. So I'm just thinking about small ways that one could flag, I'm struggling, but I have something critical, without making it all subjective.
Yeah.
Or creating an easy pathway to not have to comply.
Particularly when agencies describe their project, those aspects get teased out.
Okay.
And so the board will say, well, this seems like a reasonable project, but your approach needs to this. You need more staff. You need better project management. You need to solidify this, or this doesn't make a lot of cost sense. I don't think there's really a resource, independent resource right now that is there to guide agencies through, other than what they do themselves in their own sort of planning. But I think there's always guidance opportunities in the future to get us some consistency and provide toolkits and guidelines for doing projects that, but it's going to take us a little while to get there.
So I think it's going to be really apparent.
Okay.
Who develop their own cost estimate. So I hear what you're saying about the checkboxes of the data, and I love to be able to just go through a matrix, but it's also why we're currently developing sustainability construction design guidelines. We're developing construction guidelines. We're developing seismic construction guidelines, which we're just embarking on with 25-23. And so the more robust we make these standards and the guidelines and push them out to agencies, it's going to be very apparent if they are following proper project development. But you'll also notice that through CPAB, a lot of agencies are requesting feasibility funding, because most agencies work on a 2-year capital construction. Word left me there. Budget. So for DAS, we're a little bit different, because we'll do a feasibility study, then we'll come in, we'll just ask for everything from the beginning to the end of a project. For a lot of other agencies will come in, they'll request the feasibility to build the budget, then they'll come back and they'll ask for the design budget, then they'll come back the next biennium and ask for the construction budget.
Yep.
So you're going to see that quite a lot too.
I agree with you that it's apparent with our questions and everything else. I think that probably sufficient. But my question is procedurally, so I've been on this for a while now. And we have said, hey, we need you to come back. We have a few more questions and they come back. But what happens if we don't accept the plan? That hasn't happened in my tenure. I'm just curious, what happens if we don't accept it?
Well, I think this is the thing that I obviously been was trying to introduce here is how, what determines plan acceptance. If you don't accept the plan, I think you have to have a basis for not accepting it. And you also have to get what I think is conditionally accepted and give them a path to say what you need. To the extent that they've are fulfilling the obligations of the process to the best of their ability, you know, DAS has some discretion to say like, well, this is understandable. You have no FCA data. And so, you know, grilling you on whether or not the accuracy of your FCI over the past 3, you know, that's a little, we can grant some exception, and we're going to have to accept some of that this time around. But in terms of, we've never had such a thing happen.
Yes, nor have
So-
I haven't experienced it, and I think, I know I'm asking a hypothetical, and I do think, Daniel, the way you described it is that we always get over the hurdle, right? So we always, like, we ask good questions, it gets modified. We have another question gets modified, but we always get over the hurdle.
A conditional approval with, you know, answer these further
Yeah.
questions would be.
Yeah.
We've done that.
That's how we resolve it. It's just come back and you know, give us some more information that
Or
shows,
reject it
that
if
demonstrates
you're
that this is something it's in your thinking because it wasn't clear.
I also really appreciate your question because you're right. I've never seen one get denied, sir. You all know I'm fairly new to the Capital Planning Advisory Board. We have an opportunity right now. That's why I'm pushing to how we can evolve it and make it better. So one of the outputs of this board that I haven't seen happen is that we would like to write an overarching, like a director's memo at the conclusion. And we may not be able to say your project is terrible. We want to decline it. But what we can do is we can put a short narrative for the projects that we believe aren't necessarily put together appropriately. And then we intend to take that to the director of DAS. So following each agency, we're going to come up with some Q&A to where you guys all have an opportunity to have your opinions for each project. And then Daniel and I, we don't get to make the decision, but we want to pass that on to the director to work with CFO. That's why, remember last time we were talking about like a 1 through 5, because I don't want to put things in a priority order. I don't think that's our job, but we could actually say this is a 5 because of. And I think that instead of saying denied, we just get in the lower level.
If you don't have the ability to do that, then the board doesn't have any teeth. So why would you bother even having this whole process?
We're creating, in
Right.
my opinion, teeth by doing this, taking
Okay.
it to the director and we have an actionable document for her to work with or him, the director is.
Because I anticipate some of the plans we'll see come through, like, hey, we're in great shape. You know, we don't have any asks, we're in great shape, our facilities are fine. So that has happened for some of the smaller agencies, and some of the bigger ones are like, we got a lot we got to do with, we talked about prisons before, so.
But as we refine the process, what's exciting to me is if you have an agency, so I'll just speak for DAS. So I bring a project forward to beautify a building. But you look at my deferred maintenance and we're going down, right? And we have 5 priority 1 seismic buildings that need to be renovated. I think that this group, a great use of this group is to say, why are we doing beautification? And then we
got life safety issues to take care of, yeah.
Back to the other issue you just mentioned, maybe a confidence rating is similar to what you're talking about, that 1 through 5 rating. It's a high degree of confidence that this is done right and well and accurate. And another's like, this needs more work.
Mhm.
Sort of a scale.
Wondering if you could stratify that a little bit as well, so that there's maybe some sub-evaluations, like, is this project a critical good idea? Yes. Is it appropriately developed? Yes or no? Just a little bit of stratification. So you could have an incredibly well-developed bathroom project. If it's not critical, you might want to say, great project, well done, not critical, or something like that. Or maybe you have an agency that doesn't have any money to really do development, but they're running the only XYZ in the entire eastern region. And you can say, I see this agency's critical, this project is critical, but it's not well developed, and that doesn't mean that nothing should happen. It just means we need more support somehow as a state for that entity.
Are you
Just wondering
saying
if you
that the
could describe-
board is doing that? Or are you saying that that's happening through DAS before we get it?
I'm not really sure, but it seems like
I
that's
think that-
information that would be worth providing.
There is a lift for DAS. So if it's a bathroom project, what Daniel and my job would be is to evaluate, are there gender neutral restrooms? We would compare that to the executive order that states that you have to have a gender neutral restroom in every facility or marker to the nearest building. And so eventually, this is going to take a couple of years, but we want to do some of the lift and then produce all the executive orders, statutory rules, the OARs, to where you guys are having something to evaluate it against, because it's very difficult if you're never in a building and then you see a project proposal. How are you supposed to have a really good feeling about whether this should be approved or not approved? So as we refine the data and we put these matrices together, that's what we want to work together for. Like you saying, you started listing out the things that we should be checking. We want to pick all of your minds and be able to put together a collaborative list to where we feel like we're helping guide appropriate decisions, rather than just saying, 150,000 sounds good for that project, I think.
I was thinking of the list of questions on page 18, that might be a decent sub question.
I guess when I'm looking at the timeline of everything and how they're turning in, and I'm always somebody that wants a little more time to review packets and information that comes to a board before we have a meeting. And I feel like having 7 days is probably not enough between getting all the agencies to really get into that. If there hasn't been some kind of review by DAS that also has a cover letter that comes with that and says, we think this package might be missing this or that before we review it. So I would,
That's technically what is the design is supposed to be, is I'm supposed to come up with a staff report that says this is, generally it's about this compliance with CPC, but we don't have any necessary mandates to check the box off that we've used in the past. So, I mean, they're submitting the materials, check, but are they, for me to say, are they complying with HB 3409? That's a dig for me. I have to figure that out unless they can demonstrate it. So that
Ultimately, I want HB 3409 to be like a slide where they prove that they're meeting the energy requirements.
I think that's, to me, that's the method is it's one thing to check a box, it's another thing to show your work. So if you formulate a question, which is, if you look at the capital project review criteria, they're seemingly kind of benign questions until you have to answer them. And then it gets a lot more complex. And especially if you're answering them in front of the board, there's a bit of follow-up. So the current project phase, we have a definition for what the phases are, and
but who's answering the cost about the total project cost being reasonable, for example? Are you guys reviewing that and agreeing with that before we get it? Or are we looking at that and saying, we think it is?
we don't have any benchmarks to know what reasonable is.
Right, that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah.
So
But we have
that's
to
why I'm
establish
saying,
those.
if that's what's one of the things I have to answer, I'm not gonna be able to do that on a bunch of projects in 7 days before we meet.
So it's not something that I've never had every project brought to me. We can do it. We're sophisticated enough at DAS to do that. We just have to build that into the program. So we've been here for a year-ish, and that's where I would like to get. I think we need to be doing that due diligence myself. Because we have cost estimates per square foot for different types of projects. We have all that figured out, and we use that for ourselves. So we just haven't.
That's what I would assume. You should have something even for yourselves that says, okay, this seems reasonable cost per square foot, right? Kind of thing. But some agencies are, if they don't have that information, my experience has been that somebody thinks that what it costs to build a house is what it costs to do a commercial building per square foot, right? And you're like, oh, no, a hospital is gonna be more like $1,000 a square foot, right, kind of thing. So they're way off. And so I don't know that that's a good use of this board to be able to sit have to go through that and say, oh, I think they're way off on this cost estimate. That should be done before we get that work.
I agree.
I agree. But the criticality prioritization is something that I think also, Justin, needs to be done as advice to us, because it's very hard, I would think,
And do we agree with that advice?
that we have that choice then. We think it's more critical than maybe the staff does, but I think that needs to be a filter we get from one glance of eyes that knows all the projects and all the detail.
And I realize that that might not be able to happen for this year. So what I'm saying is that if that's not happening for this year, I think we need to relook at what you have set for the expectation on a timeline for review of the.
So if you would all be amenable, what if we went through this CPAB with these ideas in our head? That's why we're having these conversations, and then we can all take notes of things that we need to do. And then we can set that up over the course of the next year to have it in place for the next budget build.
Yeah.
Because there's only a handful of projects since I've been here in the last 12, 14 years that are really significantly large. And typically those come in with feasibility studies, and there's been engineers and architects. It's the one-offs. Like I have an odd one this year. I'm asking for $100 million bond money for tenant improvements. I don't know if it'll actually get to the point where it's actually really requested, but I built out a full document of X amount of dollars per square foot, and I broke out the contingency and the A&E costs. And so to me, that's what we want to see from an agency to be able to say, let's push this forward. Typically it's, we need a roof or we need this, and they're really simple to look at. So I think we could build out a path of how we want to take this on. And I'm really curious about the seismic, because that's going to become a whole new, who's got a lot.
Sure is.
Yeah, that's expensive.
Yeah, on the seismic front, there are many ways. I have done a lot of work over the years for different, on the private side, also on the public side. Typically is that you do very high level assessment. There's a planning level cost estimate. Typically, we have a range of the cost from $5 million to $10 million. So as then the design team or consultant team, they take to the next level, do more detailed analysis. Now they are able to put a more essentially they sort of flesh out the original high level retrofit schemes, why not. Now they're able to, let's say, yes, we told you previous $5 to $10 million. Actually, it's somewhere around $8 to $9 million in that range. So then by the time you finish the construction documents, you get another set of numbers. So, so we have different level called level, 3, 4, 5 or something like that, kind of different level based on if it's a planning level, it's more, more detailed based on more detailed analysis or based on the actual design construction documents. So I don't know I want to ask you this question too, is that when state agency come forward, ask you for budget requests, was based on the high level, like a planning level type of cost estimate, and say, okay, I know it's going to be somewhere between $5 million to $10 million. I'm going to ask for $10 million because that's the most conservative way of doing it. Or another agency said, well, we want to be more thoughtful about it. They did a detailed analysis, and so now they have much better understanding what it takes to do the retrofit. So they have narrowed down their scope, somewhere close to $8 million. So they may come back to ask for $8 million. So, it's even with the same building, it depends on the approach they're using. One agency could ask for $10 million, the other one could only ask $8 million. Depends on the level of effort they put into it.
That's very true. Is there an answer you're looking for there? Because where I see that we can get in front of that is our construction standards, our seismic standards, as sustainability standards.
And also we can ask them, when the cost estimate doing their estimate, there's different levels. We can ask for which level are you, this is the level. It's just to kind of answer Manny's questions. Level of confidence, this kind of will tell us, are you taking this
Feasibility level or?
Yeah.
yes, detailed analysis level, yes.
I know on our projects, when we are given a number, we'll say $100 million. If you go with exactly what the feasibility study says, you will fall short. You know, so a good question to
Right.
me is, are you building in escalation of construction
Mhm.
labor costs? And those are things that
Right.
we really, I would like to get to the point where they're showing those numbers.
So the other thing is because a lot of those are like escalation, different like permitted fees and contractors, their profits, all those things, because they were compounding. Essentially it's 1 plus 5%. Okay, then add another 10%. They're compounding very quickly. You say, oh my God, it's the labor cost is this much. By the time we finish the construction, is it a 2x or 3x or 4x? Something like that. So do we oftentimes, at state level, do we require, hey, we're going to use this consistently using, this is the escalation you're going to use. This is the, estimate how much fee contract is going to make from this project. Sometimes I notice that some contract, if you use contract to do the cost estimate, they use like one set of numbers. If you use professional cost estimator, somebody just punch the numbers from their basement, they use a different set of numbers. So there's variability, quite a bit of variabilities across the board. So it might be a good idea to have some sort of guidelines so that you can get a consistent numbers.
So we do share our escalation, P&E, soft cost
Mhm.
projections with other agencies. They call us typically
Okay.
and ask for our help. And then we not only look, like, we call OTAC and we'll say, hey, what are your latest numbers? We'll compare them to what we have. And then we also use our real life cost
Okay.
escalation, because there's a difference between what's projected out there and then what we're actually being charged. And then also telling the contractor exactly how much money you have. They will spend it all.
Yes.
So trying to teach agencies not to necessarily share that
Yes.
number,
Yes.
but we do develop and put these numbers together and share them. It doesn't mean that we couldn't put something out a year before CPAB and say, hey, these are our updated numbers. That would be a point where this board once again could become
Right.
at a higher level.
Well, Tririga has a means module, means estimating module that would be consistent for everybody to use if everybody's on Tririga.
So that's for the deferred maintenance numbers and whatnot that will come in, but not necessarily construction development. But what Dave's saying is that with our new FCA module, we have an RS means to where it's going to update and inflate all of our assets and our deferred maintenance costs in lifetime
But it's consistent is the biggest issue.
across
Yeah.
all of state. And then we could potentially use that as a tool. We could develop a tool potentially in Tririga to where it would help with construction estimates, but you are right. It just really depends on who you're working with and making sure that you have somebody that has been constructing projects and not an agency that doesn't necessarily construct projects on a regular basis. So we want to be more involved, and I think this group is a really good key to that door.
I'm catching on more now to what you were asking, and I'm becoming more paranoid as I read the questions and my ability to answer them. But so I feel like these are awesome North Star questions, but I would agree, just as long as everybody knows going into this round, there's sort of there's, unless you have absolutely perfect data, and that data could even differentiate between construction costs in Portland and Ontario. Everything here is sort of a guesstimate, and I'm sure that's what you're expecting.
That is what I was expecting.
As long,
The,
yeah,
the need for this cost data thing, that has been forever. If we had some sort of benchmark and some continuously updated, low, medium, high, whatever, something that could be used as a way to sort of pre-evaluate the reasonableness of it without saying, what do you guys think is reasonable? But I think in the context of this, where we're at is, does it seem egregious? Within your professional opinion, we're not using it as necessarily as a formal grading tool, but just as an advisement. Like, this seems a little sketchy. That's enough context to help inform the conversation a little, as opposed to nothing. But we just need to build those things over time that you're referring to, that gives kind of a that you aren't doing that work necessarily, that we can do that work. That's how they do it in the state of Washington. They have like an engineer on staff, and he kicks the numbers on every project's numbers.
Right. I mean,
But that's a
we have
different
a lot of
structure.
Washington state buildings in our portfolio, and so that's where the state architect is usually coming up with a number. I mean, he's wrong 90% of the time, but at least it's gone through some kind of process.
Yeah.
Right?
We just don't have that
Typically,
structure.
they don't have, they're doing it at too high a level and not equating enough contingency at the confidence level that it should be at, is what I've typically seen from Washington State.
Mhm.
But it is being vetted by their DAS before it goes
Yeah.
somewhere. Yeah.
So would a safer way to accommodate your comments have this say something along the lines of recognizing the variability in things and the development of things, the board may evaluate the following types of questions at a low level of confidence, or offer a low level of confidence in its responses. So that would free us up to feel more comfortable at saying yes or no, or maybe even yes or no plus a couple comments, without feeling like we're offering, a binding rubber stamping of absolutely they have the capacity to execute this project. I check yes, and in fact, they have one person and a dog. Or something.
Right.
I mean, I just wonder if would buffering the language just slightly allow us to keep it as a North Star, but not feel quite as uncomfortable when we're being asked to do the review.
I don't even know if I would say that I have an uncomfort level with it. I just feel like to be asking this body to make that decision, like all of us have our own expertises in our own field, but we're not going to be project managing that or managing the funds once it's, we're giving our recommendation approval, not actually approving the project either. That I don't, if that hasn't, I don't have a high level of confidence if that hasn't been reviewed by somebody here that is doing that work after it's gone through this process. So that becomes me saying a lot of approval with conditions then, if we're not ever going to say it's not approved either, which then if I backtrack that all through, what are we doing here, right? Why do we even have this board? So I just think that, yes, this is where we are today, but there is a lot of room for improvement when I have gone through this manual.
This is great. This is exactly what I was hoping for, because we're taking a lot of notes. And then what my goal is to take these notes and then come back and say, hey, this is what we heard. This is how we're starting to see the solution. I'm hesitant to just say, yes, we'll look at every project this biennium. And the reason being is that I need to make sure that we're staying within our rule. And I don't want to make like ODOT and OYA and everybody angry because Jeremy said that he doesn't think this project should be where it's at. So we're gonna have to work through that with the agencies and share the matrices and the decisions that we're gonna be able to make and how we would work together to do that. This is the best I've ever seen this group work together. I so much appreciate it.
What do you see as the deliverable? So I hear you talk about, you're talking about some sort of memo in each one. I guess I realize, like with Bill, I've been through this, and I know something happens that gets written down, and move forward.
So
What's the deliverable that actually this board provides?
historically, we've collected all of the data, all of the reports that all the agencies bring, and then it's put into a file system where people can go look. I would like to create an executive memo at the conclusion to kind of give an overlay of where the enterprise as a whole is headed. Agencies, it could be something where we could even say this agency's deferred maintenance has climbed steadily over the past 6 years. And alert the director, because this is the director of DAS's board. And so I feel like we owe an executive memo to the director of DAS so that they can use that as maybe a North Star for themselves for working with CFO and working with the
incorporate
governor's office.
our comments. Is that what you do?
Absolutely.
So, it might be, it's not really a form, may or may not be a form that you send, it's our comments, right?
The first one will be the roughest one, and we'll have an outline for the next biennium. But
I understand for this year,
We
we're
more of an analysis. What did we find? What did we learn?
Yeah.
What time can we save the director because we've had a chance to carefully review all the submitted packages?
Because we know, the point is, even while they're here, we can't really ask them every question that's gonna go through our minds that we would ask if there were our own projects.
we're so fortunate to have this group around the table.
Yeah.
And so what I want to do is put this group in a position where we can actually help guide the decision. and not have it just be something that you come participate in. But I think that we could be very helpful for the facilities for the state of Oregon working together.
Okay.
So
Received.
So Dan, I think one of the things that opened this up, you showed that checklist, and I think, yeah, having a consistent, and maybe we all have our binders in front of us or whatever, but having that consistent things that we should be listening for and looking for, I think is very helpful.
Okay.
So I know that was one of your questions you were asking.
I agree.
I think,
Maybe supplement with some of the questions on 18, but I think that template was very helpful.
On this, and we haven't heard any feedback from anyone from DAS on the call or any of the agency directors. If any of them have a thought they would like to add, could we take a minute, Daniel, to give them a chance to join the conversation?
yeah, I think I'm through kind of guiding, so I think now it's just I can take comments and reasonable comments. I mean, we can't change the process. There's a reason why some of these things, all of these things are in here, whether or not they're worded properly or that's what we're the level that we're at. So. Any volunteers?
Okay. Oh, okay. Um, good morning. I'm Shannon Ryan. I'm the administrator for Enterprise Asset Management. And I don't have any feedback or comments aside from just echoing what Jeremy said. Just really appreciate you all around this table. And we are so very lucky to have such expertise helping us guide us. So I am here taking notes along with the rest of the DAS folks and look forward to coming back to you again. So I just want to say thank you.
All right, looks like Lori has a comment. Go ahead, Lori.
Good morning. I also want to thank you guys. This has been a great conversation to listen to, and the questions that have come up, I've really appreciated, especially you guys are always really good about trying to think about the agency perspective. I'm curious on, if I missed this, I apologize, but are you still planning, if you're going to relook at the scheduling for presentations, are you still planning on sending out the new templates for the agencies to get their report and presentation put together? And do you have an idea of when you'll send that out?
So there's not going to be like a CPAB workbook per se. Because
Okay,
I'm not producing those anymore. Everything now is in Triria. So, and if you need assistance with Triria, we have a dedicated administrator that will walk you through everything. So let me know if you're in that situation. I think we've been working with your agency to get your data in there in the past. So somebody is apprised of what's going on.
okay, and I apologize because I understood that we were exempt from using Trieriga because we don't have, we have our own system.
Yeah, you're doing what's called data integration. But
Okay,
ultimately, you're still going to need to actually submit your report, which is just runs your report and PDFs it, and that gets included in your plan. So you're exempt from a range of buildings, but there's still some other assets in there that you're going to have to enter some values in on. So
okay,
Eric should know that.
okay. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. And what was the other part of your question, Lori? I forgot.
Oh, that's okay. I was just, if you guys were going to look at reviewing the presentation schedule, if that was going to change.
All of this depends on what the governor's office is going to do. This is
Okay.
my proposal that gives us an extra month as opposed to how it was last biennium, which was a little chaotic. But we work for the governor's office, so we will accommodate. But that's my proposal at this point. And so this is not final and not to be sent out to the agencies as a final product yet. This is just,
Okay.
we're just reviewing this internally. So don't assume that that's
It's
final
not final, okay,
until it comes in your email, your inbox from me.
okay.
All right, Daniel,
Thanks,
looks
Daniel.
like-
Thanks to everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Before we,
Cameron,
Go ahead.
I just want to continue, I just want to continue the conversation we just had, instead of just switching to a different topic. So, with respect to the schedule though, but agencies should be on notice now, and like, this is more than likely than not to be the schedule, so know your timing to become before this board.
yes.
And it may change.
In any other time, any normal time, what I just wrote right now would have been like the schedule.
Okay.
But we have this sort of X factor that we're trying to get nailed down about what the governor's office expectation is. So we're a little delayed in that.
So be it, but I just want to make, and then do all the agencies have access to the schedule today? As proposed?
Not proposed, no.
And
Nobody does.
And I wonder if they should, just so they can get, again,
Da-
start.
Da-
get about
Daniel?
Yes,
It looks
This
like
is Tamara. I'm meeting with Kate early on next week to try and nail some things down so we can get you guys ready to put out the schedule. So I just wanted to let you know that that hasn't happened yet, but that's going to happen next week.
sounds good. I think in our next meeting, I sort of see us just, this should be finalized. Oh, wait, you got another question? Oh, no, okay. This finalized, ready to send out with the schedule, but also we'll do like review documents. I'll put some things together for you to look at, and we'll have that final sort of seismic template so we can release that to agencies, and that needs a little bit more of a how-to instructions supplied to it, but let's think about the next meeting.
Okay.
We'll have things formal. And that accords to how we the typical schedule of things. February is like pencils down time. So
it looks like Daniel, that McGowan might have had a question. Did you capture that in the chat?
It's in the chat. He said to help address the question on level of confidence and estimate, I recommend adding another phase option. Phase 1, rough order magnitude, ROM, without any detailed analysis. Phase 2, planning/design. Phase 3, construction. Maybe an ROM estimate can lead to approval of a smaller budget amount for taking the project to the next phase with more detailed analysis with consultant of an A&E assistance. I can show that. I can
That's
put
doing a stage thing you were talking about.
Yes.
So we do
Another
have the
comment,
phasing in
Melissa.
there. Just
There was another comment in the chat from Melissa Garner.
There you go. There's the chat. Melissa says she would appreciate having a list of aspirational standards to work toward. What are the things that an ideal project would include, and or what would make it easy for CPAB to evaluate our presentation and material?
That list of questions, to a degree, I would interpret that as the list of aspirational standards. Does it align with a clear plan? Is it reasonable? Has it been evaluated? Does it meet compliance?
Right, the stuff on page 18.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And in the past, all agencies had a template of the presentation, right? So we'll have that. So we're not bouncing back and forth trying to figure things out. It's like, okay, here's the format. So I assume that's what we'll be doing again this year.
and I think on Jeffrey's question, that is kind of what you were explaining earlier, right? Some agencies come and they're bringing you the ROM, and then the next time they come to you, they're bringing you the next level after they've had some design work done. And so that does give a lot more confidence in what that number is. But I also understand you need to start with something to get the ball rolling. But that might be something that, as this evolves for the future, that becomes part of the requirement, even that it has to go through those kind of phases, possibly depending on the size of the project. I could see that being what you guys end up with.
Daniel, I'm
Um,
incorrect when I say that there's very few, like, we're one of the few agencies that come and ask for the 150 million. There's not a lot of that. We're coming in because we've done the due diligence. Most agencies are small pieces as they work through it until they get to construction. Am I misspeaking there? That's what I've noticed.
Yeah, I think that's pretty consistent. I mean, with the occasional outlier, I guess. Yeah.
And those outliers from other agencies, those are the ones we really dive into. And we dive into DAS as well. We like to think that we bring stuff.
So the phasing part was in here at one time. We did, it got moved into our review form, but I think it needs to be in this. So that's actually a good suggestion, Jeff, just to restore because the phases that we had correspond largely to what Jeff outlined. And we have what is the current phase of the project as a question in the capital project review criteria, but we need to put that in the manual, what those phases are. That was in here and somehow it got, so that you actually caught something. So that's thank you. Fix that soon. But yeah, the intent is to evaluate a project in addition to just a project, but what phase it's in. If it's, it's in a planning phase or if it's in a construction phase. But we had stratified a little bit more about what that phase 1 would be, what phase 2 would be, and then so that in there. So other than that, unless somebody has some other questions, that's kind of all I have.
I don't have any other question, just observation, this is a neat thing, is that sometimes we capitalize boards, sometimes we don't, sometimes we capitalize area plans, sometimes we don't. That's just me being me, so.
We have to send our materials to our communications team, and they have their own style guide.
Okay.
So this entire document has been gone through for that purpose. So some of it is sort of new to me because I'm used to like APA style or something like that, where that's what planners use. But just so I'm still kind of getting used to it. But I'm learning from what they want to see. So
I think it has to do with whether board is the name or whether it's just referring to the body.
yeah.
So that's why sometimes if the sentence reads that it's just discussing the body, then it's lowercase, but if it's saying the board.
Yeah, I think sometimes
That's
there's some of the
property.
board,
Yeah.
so just.
Yeah, so that's probably why you're seeing the differences, but it bugs me too as a former teacher.
Let's just delete all capitalization like texting.
Yeah, there you go.
No
Or you can do all cap, no, make it.
Daniel, Amy, maybe what I'd like to see is that future building is what is in my mind. All these comments are really great and I don't want to lose any of them. If we could start collecting those into like a project plan. And then our goal will be to go and start developing some of these new future plans and bring them back, and we can just continually get approval and or recommendations as we move forward. We can build this in lifetime. Otherwise, if we wait and try to build a project in 2 weeks, it's gonna be really difficult. So I don't want to lose these, but we could just start putting those into a project plan as well. We can share it, update the group with it every meeting that we have, and we can kind of track of what we've integrated. And if we run up against something and say, that might be outside of our purview and ability, then we can bring that back to the board and say, we saw this comment, but this is why we don't think it'll work. And we can kind of make decisions collectively. And in the end, we'll have a really good product, I believe, for unfortunately 2931 budget bill.
It might be a good idea. I know that with, a lot of the things that we're talking about, it definitely can't be implemented for this round of things. But maybe after this round is over, that we do spend a meeting doing an after action review on how that went and what we think could be addressed for the future, right?
I usually do that in October. We do that.
Okay, I'm not done though.
Oh, sorry.
and have a good recording of what those things are from everybody in here, right? So we can look at what, prioritizing that and seeing what we implement for the next time around. I think that would help us get there in a probably more methodical and even faster way. However, even still going back to thinking about what the purpose is really of this body, and I'm struggling a little bit with the not approving, and that we just always approve even with conditions. It just feels to me like, and I know that I brought this up in our last meeting and it wasn't super well received, but I feel like there needs to be a charter for this group to give it a little bit more teeth.
Well, there's a charter.
I'm sorry, I'm not done yet.
Okay.
And so I would like to see that be, as we are moving forward, taking that into consideration. And that is after this process is over.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Daniel's gonna say we have a charter, but I think that what we do is we open the charter and
Yes.
we dig through that charter and make sure that it's in alignment with what we discover through our after action reports. Is that fair, Daniel?
That's fair. I mean, yes, I mean, we not to, cut you off, it's just, we do those things. It ultimately becomes sort of a limit to what is the statutory authority of this board, which it doesn't have any real power. It's advisory, just so the nature of it is such that there isn't the tooth that people would like it to have. And I understand the frustration of that, but we kind of encounter that almost every biennium where I think people get kind of folded into the process and realize there's the output doesn't necessarily validate all the input that goes into it. And
That's where I'm struggling. We're putting all of these agencies through this gauntlet, if you will, to come through here. And then, does it really matter?
yeah, so this is strategically where we're trying to bolster the board's influence in such, but it's kind of incremental and requires finesse because there isn't this authoritative thing that we can use unless the director says to do that, because it's the director's board. Statutorily, there isn't a lot to work with in terms of what the role of the board is, other than to advise the DAS director. So I hear everything you're saying, and everything you're saying is valid. It's about how we sort of guide that into fruition in a way that is as we
I've got a point there, Daniel, if I may.
go for it.
That's the purpose of the executive summary, is to get the attention of the director of DAS so that will give us the ability to empower this board. And that's, I think there's a lot of juice there, if you will, if we can start getting that buy-in and that input and start having our voice heard beyond. So right now, we're not sure who's hearing it. So
That's what I felt like you were trying to accomplish with that. Yes.
your comments are amazing. Thank you. This is great.
Being advisory, I think that does give us, I would say it gives us more flexibility to say, hey, look, our recommendation is this one doesn't pass. And that's okay, right?
Right.
So, but I know historically we haven't done that. I think we've always we've gotten over the hurdle, but I think that is an option for us. It doesn't always have to pass.
So, for instance, if you establish a prioritization, you have to accept the possibility and the potential that prioritization is not followed. Is that acceptable for this group in terms of feeling validated or feeling meaningful? I think it's a struggle, but we can prioritize. There's a thing that says we can't develop a rubric. It's about whether or not that rubric gets sort of translated through the rest of the process, or if it's just advisory. And I can't answer that question, but I think that if we put a package together that's very compelling, that shows the level of effort and level of expertise put into reviewing it. I've done that in the past. In terms of the process, that generally helps out. So,
Hey, Daniel, I was look at the binder you provided to us. I think there's a charter over here.
Mhm.
I think our role and responsibility is only provide recommendations and information through the desk director to the governor. So essentially, we provide recommendations. We don't approve or
Correct.
we just provide a recommendation. And whether it's favorable or unfavorable, and we'll state in the executive summary, and then that information will be forwarded to the desk director. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the traditional output is really a list of projects and sort of what the status of them was recommended, not recommended, and then whatever summary I can put together about what your comments were. That's the output.
Right.
But it's just kind of like a spreadsheet thing. It's not something super compelling and doesn't convey like challenges from the agency. That comes in these budget documents over here. And so it's kind of mismatch. If we consolidate it, it kind of has a more compelling narrative about it.
If the board provide unfavorable recommendation, would a desk director like to see, the reasons behind it, or?
Absolutely, I
Okay.
would assume. And that has happened in the past. It has resulted in a project not being funded.
Okay.
So
So it's a denial of sort.
it's a passive kind of a thing, that somebody's saying, well, your recommendation has meaning and this doesn't make sense. I agree. I'm not going to support this. But that's only happened like a couple of times. But I think absolutely the basis and the reasoning, I think, is the point of why you're participating here. If it's just to get kind of consensus on a yes or no or something like that, that doesn't really necessarily help if you're having a couple of projects that are on the margin and you're evaluating them. So what's the context of this project relative in comparison to this? And given what our goals are for the state goals, it could be that the effort is for economic development or something like that. So the lens is applied to which one kind of makes more sense for what the agenda is for the session or something like that.
Daniel?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I know how challenging it is to try to create order and structure and meet large and distributed systems that aren't really connected and that are maybe bureaucratic in nature, sometimes really political in nature. So thank you for fielding all my questions as I try to figure out what's happening and what the role is of this. And please take any suggestion I offer with a grain of salt, because one thing I've slowly become aware of in my own career is how much a big idea I have just kind of like ricochet through everybody's work, sometimes internally, sometimes downstream, and create a lot of stuff for people that I didn't intend. And so I know what kind of complicated systems you're working in, and so I really appreciate you allowing the space to ask questions. And especially also maybe if there's spaces to clarify your meeting, maybe in the fall on our role, and to help support you, because I think you guys have brilliant ideas. These compared to what could be, these are really brilliant guidance documents, even as they are. And so it's a lot of work. I appreciate it. I might try to steal it for my own purposes. That's how much I appreciate it. And yeah, please take everything I say with a grain of salt as I'm learning. And key goal of mine is to not create unintended work or complexities or drama in systems that I don't really know or understand or how to deal with the concepts of. So
We appreciate that, but I just want everybody in the room to know that we are being very careful about who we're inviting. We're very specific. I mean, we want people that poke and make things difficult because we have very smart people in this room, and that's the way we're going to grow and get better. So please never hold back. But I think there's one point that Daniel, maybe we're missing is with this executive summary, Director Imholt is very active, just like previous directors, but she's going to want a partner. And my intention would be we'll do an executive summary and we'll bring her to a meeting and we can have conversations, determine what she would like to see and how we can best serve to be able to get that information to the governor's office and or CFO. So there's a lot of steps here. It's just, we're gonna get through this one CPAB and then I'm gonna put everything I can until I hit a wall. I'll just be honest with you all if we do, but I think we can elevate this particular board to the level that it should be. And we have the right people at the table that can feel that. Lots of information, very robust conversations. You've been here for a while and
Yeah, that's true.
you can feel we're trying to elevate.
Return it to you, Bruce.
All right, I'd like to acknowledge Renee Fraser and Katie Banikoff. We have Dash Capital and LFO directors at the table and would like to give them a moment to add any insights to our meeting today, if you please.
Hi, thanks, Bruce. For the record, Katie Banikoff, I'm the legislative fiscal analyst, or fiscal office capital construction analyst now. And I just think that you guys have done a great job of going through with the instructions and listening to your questions. I think also the information you presented about the timeline and how this will work for agencies is very helpful. So thank you for letting me listen in, and I don't think I have any other adds or changes. So thank you.
Welcome. Not seeing any more comment. So not hearing any other questions. Any other questions from the board? Our next meeting, Amy, will you give us a reminder of when our next?
February 13th.
February 13th.
No, double checking because I'm like, wait, Friday the 13th? Yes, Friday the 13th. Bill has put the fear of calendar in me.
I put the fear in somebody.
Well, thank you all for a productive and insightful discussion today. Thought we had a really good, valuable meeting time. And thanks to, of course, Jeremy, Amy, and Daniel, and all the members that have joined us via Teams. So we stand adjourned until our next meeting on February 13th.
You all.
Thank you.